Hello, it's Glassy here back with another Tribes video, and in light of the new Alliance Team Battle event, today I'm going to be discussing how to optimize your teams and maximize your damage output. So first things first, shout out to Benito for actually creating this guide in writing, and if you guys don't know him already, he is a long-standing member of the community and a team builder as well, so definitely qualified to share knowledge on this specific event. And also shout out to Giacomoco and Cephia from server 3 because they are the inventors of the love strat, which is the meta strategy that everyone should be using if they have the units to maximize damage output in Alliance Team Battle. And the core of this strategy is basically using a tribe and then using a bunch of support buffers and debuffers in order to boost the damage of the tribe. So the tribe is the main source of damage, not necessarily the 6 other units. And there are a few scenarios that happen, so keep in mind that you might need to do some adjusting, but most of the time you want to use the strategy when you have 100% tribe gauge on turn 1, and the reason is because you want to tribe 3 times during the course of 7 turns. So assuming your alliance voted for a certain unit to be first place, that will give you an 100% tribe gauge on the first turn. And if you voted for a unit and it was second and you were fighting him, then you will get 80% tribe gauge. And I'll discuss this scenario as well because you have to rearrange your team a little bit. But let's just assume you start with 100% tribe gauge. So you put your tribe in force. You have Sai for chakra generation, obviously, which is important because the rest of your units want a jutsu, most of them. And then you have a tribe gauge booster here. So that is a unit that is able to increase the tribe gauge by a certain amount using one of their skills or jutsus. So you want one of those as well. So starting with 100%, you tribe on turn 1. Here, KCM Naruto is really, really good for this event just because of his buffs and his insta-jutsu. And if you don't have him, you're going to have to think of some replacements, which will be discussed later on. But let's assume we have him here. Then you want to use his jutsu here. For Sai, you want to use his skill 2, actually, because that applies an attack buff to the allies. So you want to swipe up on his portrait. And then if you see the little kunai icon appear in the circle, that means the skill 2 is available. If it's not, then you can reset, which basically means restarting the game so you don't waste your battle attempt. So assuming you get the skill 2, use that. And then for Jiraiya, you want to use his jutsu. If you're using Choji or Sakura Blossom, they won't have enough chakra by the time turn 2 comes around. So you want to use their skill 2s. And if you don't have them available, just because you got unlucky, you need to reset. Now for turn 3, you want Shikamaru to land his stun with his jutsu. Stun is equal to Shadow Bind. It's basically the same thing. And Shikamaru does a heavy debuff. So after that is landed, you want to use Datara's jutsu as well to land an extra debuff, and also use buffs that he gives from his jutsu and the rest of his kit. And then for your last character, it doesn't have to be T-Gara, but if it is T-Gara, you use jutsu. There are a lot of other T units you could use here, but most of them want to jutsu as well. So do that. Turn 4, you'll be doing a lot of debuffing and buffing, so your tribe will be able to be used again as well from the tribe gauge increase. Use the tribe, should do more damage. Turn 5 and 6 do the same things as before. Turn 7 you tribe again, and that should do even more damage. So a lot of damage over 3 main turns. The rest of the turns are basically just charging up. And that's like the general idea for how to do this. And of course, there are going to be replacements. So let's talk about which units cannot be replaced. Shikamaru is basically a required unit. At this point, he just has so much usefulness packed into one. And the reason he's so good in this mode is because there's only one enemy unit. So he'll always land his debuffs, his stuns on the right unit, and the rest of your units will always be able to take advantage of these effects because there's only one unit to target. So you don't need to worry about randomness or anything. So you can do that. He also has passive boosts for T units, which make up a majority of your team as well. So he really does have it all here. He's an excellent ATB unit. Now for the Tribe Gauge booster, Benato split them up into Jiraiya and Choji / Sakura Blossom. And the reason is because Jiraiya has the insta 5k chakra, so he'll have half his bar right off the bat. And with Sai, obviously, you can fill up the rest of the bar by the time his turn comes around on turn 2. So you can actually use his jutsu instead. Now, for Choji and Sakura Blossom, this is not possible because of their vitalities / their kits. So you need to use their skill 2s instead. And that takes some resetting because that is pretty random. And if you use their skill 2s, then they'll basically have the same effect of boosting the tribe gauge. So by the time you rotate back to your force cell, you'll have your tribe ready again. Yeah, so if you have Jiraiya, make sure to put him in. But make sure to upgrade his vitality to level 20, the first vitality. So that way he gets his 5k chakra. Now, Sai is obviously a required unit. He gives chakra to everybody on the team so that they can use their jutsus and their effects. Shikamaru also has 5k vitality. I forgot to mention that. So upgrade that as well. Now, if you're using Blossom instead of Sai, like for example, if you don't have Sai 6-star LB2, if you're a newer player, you can try using Blossom as well. And she can have chakra support from her kit. So, it is not as effective as Sai's, but it still works. And make sure to have her at 4-star, at least. Now, these are some good placements. But obviously it depends on the rest of your units. Just remember, tribes are in force. Shikamaru is always first in energy. Sai and Jiraiya are in spirit. They don't necessarily have to be first, but most of the time Sai is first because you want to reset for his skill 2, which is a buff. But in the case of KCM, which is even more buffs, you want to put him in front of Sai. And if you're using Blossom, you put her in energy. This is when Blossom is replacing Sai, not when Blossom is used as a tribe gauge generator. If she is, then you can kind of put her wherever depending on the rest of your units. So now let's talk about some of the other useful units to use. There are replacement options, but these are the most effective buffers to use. KCM, obviously, so much useful stuff all packed into one and an insta-jutsu. Tigara, you need him 6-star LB2. Also has a lot of good buffs and such for DIR and attack. T-Data, a 4-star, really good for crit buffs. Also can do debuffs. So I really like T-Data with Shikamaru because they combo well together. Mei's pretty cool as well. She can buff status effects, so that helps with stuns, so the enemies don't actually kill your useful units. And she can also buff some jutsus and other stats. Kid Kakashi, really great. If you have him at 4-star, at least, then he can use DIR buffs every single turn because of his passive, which activates when you have a faster cell than your opponents. I think I've talked about this a lot because I used to use a strategy similar to this. I still probably will because he's just really effective, and mine happens to be at a really high level. So yeah, he has some really great passive buffs, and he can also nuke pretty well with his jutsu. He can debuff D units. You could even think about using his skill 2 to buff T units. T Boruto, really underrated for some reason. Like, people don't really realize how useful he can be for things like this, but he also has DRR buffs from his jutsu for 3 turns, which is more than enough. And then he can also do some other buffs. T Kisame, one of the newer units, Same thing, he can increase TIR, but he doesn't give as much buffs as the others. So that's why we have him last year. Now, there are also secondary buffers. Oh, I forgot about A Narukage, actually. He's also really good. We used to use him a lot. And by we, I mean like the community used to use him a lot. But nowadays, there could be better options. But he still has a lot of good buffs for DIR, attack, etc. Now, for secondary buffers, these are mainly used as substitutes. So if you already have enough units to fill up your team, then you don't really need to use these guys. CM2 Sasuke, you want to have him at 4-star for his passive buff. That activates every turn. 10-10 also does great attack buffs. You want to use her skill 2. And she also has, a skill 4, but the skill 2 is the main one here. And this one is kind of more luck-based, so that's why 10-10 is not as good as the ones above. Criminal Itachi and Kid Sasuke also give attack buffs, but they have to jutsu on turn 3, and their buffs are just not as good as some of the other ones. Kid Sasuke does give chakra, which is pretty interesting, and can help your units jutsu, but I don't necessarily think you need it if you have Sai already. And also he can stun too, but you have Shikamaru to do that for you. Kiba, kind of similar to CM2, you probably don't want to use him unless you really need to. There are also some 2 special cases, but this is mainly against a unit, and it's a very niche case. Now, here are 2 examples of where to put your buffers, and I can explain why these are good. We obviously have Shikamaru first in energy because he debuffs heavily. We have Sai first in this case because he uses skill 2. Blossom instead of Sai because we're assuming you don't have Sai here. Blossom does tribe gauge, chakra, etc. So make sure to put her in energy. She's kind of like an all-in-one package, really good for this. But most of the time, Sai is probably just better and more consistent. If you have Sai, you can use Jiraiya if you have him. So you don't need to worry about resetting for the skill 2s of Blossom or Choji. You just put him in Spirit. Then he'll jutsu and give you tribe gauge. If you have KCM, you want to put him before Sai even, because his buffs are just nutty. Deidara, you can put him usually like in a fill spot. It doesn't really have to be too specific, but if you can, try to put him behind Shikamaru. So if Shikamaru stuns, then he applies an extra debuff because he debuffs enemies affected with a status effect. Kid Kakashi, you can kind of fill in as well. His main buff potential comes from his passive, so it doesn't really need to be affected by where he's placed on the team or like which attack he's using. Remember that if you use the skill 2, you can actually buff T-unit attack, I believe. So that's something to consider over using his jutsu, but his jutsu nukes a lot. Tigara, you want to use 6-star LB2, has attack buffs on jutsu, and also buffs from his 4th skill / limit break. Einar Rukage, jutsu, I believe, is pretty decent, but you can also use his skill 2. And Kiba, probably try not to use him unless necessary, but he's kind of in a fill spot. 10-10, try to put her further up because she does buffs with her skill 2. And you need a reset for that. Just some examples and some ideas. Then we have to think about what are actually the best tribe specials. So Connected Feelings is the best tribe special to use right now. And then New Team 7 or Team 7 Reborn is like the free-to-play version because not everyone has you are Sarda and you are Papa Sasuke. Both of these are really good tribes, so make sure to use those. And then you can actually boost tribe special damage. So you go to the alliance page, then you can spend your chips on boosting certain stats. So you want to try to boost the A units, T units, the tribe special damage boost, and then the tribe special bonus damage boost. So for this ATB, Team 7 Reborn is actually one of the special tribes. So make sure to upgrade this if you're using Team 7 Reborn, which should be a lot of people. And this will give you a lot of boosts on that tribe. So here are just some more example teams. Just remember, try to think about who's buffing, who's debuffing. That will help you figure out the ordering in general. And yeah, on 100% tribe gauge, you want to put your tribe in force. Now we can quickly take a look at what happens if you have 80%, which means you're attacking the second unit you chose with your alliance. And that means having your tribe in spirit instead. Trying to have your tribe gauge boosters in energy instead, because they won't be able to jutsu on turn 1. You want to have the other supports in force, and this basically allows you to attack normally on turn 1, tribe on turn 2. On turn 3, you use 2 tribe gauge boosters at once, which gives a lot of tribe gauge. So by the time you come back around, you can use your tribe again, and then one more time. So this still works. It's a little bit sketchy because you also need to get pretty lucky to stop the enemy from jutsuing / killing off your units like in the middle of this process. So you really need to think about this one a little bit more. Not as easy to pull off as the 100% strategy, which is the main strategy. So hopefully this video helped you guys out. We haven't actually started our ATB yet, but our alliance, well, both of my alliances are using these strategies that I'm sharing today, so they're definitely really effective. And see you guys in the next video.